We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary, he smirked during my termination meeting. Nothing personal, just cost-cutting. My name is Victor Hale, 55 years old, lead systems engineer at Veltria Housing for 18 years. I had built their entire infrastructure from scratch, architected every expansion, kept everything running so seamlessly that the executives forgot how much the company depended on me, until they decided they couldn't afford me anymore. I sat across from Graham Vickers, the new chief technology officer who had been with the company all of 6 months. He was 42, wore designer glasses, and had an MBA from Cornell. He'd been hired to modernize operations, which apparently meant cutting the most experienced staff first. "The severance package is generous," said Diane from HR, sliding a folder across the table. 2 months' salary plus accrued vacation time. I nodded, took the folder, and said, "Thank you." "Is that all you have to say?" Graham asked, almost disappointed. Maybe he'd expected me to argue, threaten legal action, or at least raise my voice, something he could use to tell the board how difficult I was being. "What would you like me to say?" "Most people in your position have questions. Concerns?" I shrugged. "Seems pretty straightforward to me." Graham exchanged a glance with Diane, both of them perplexed by my calm. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't calm. I was finished. There's a difference. "Well, we'd appreciate your help with the transition," Graham continued. "The new engineering team will need guidance on the system architecture. Perhaps a consulting arrangement for a few weeks?" "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. We shook hands. I cleared out my desk without complaint. 18 years of work fit into one cardboard box. I nodded goodbye to a few colleagues, most of whom looked away, afraid they might be next. In the parking garage, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan, the database administrator I'd hired 12 years ago. "This is brutal, Vic. The whole team's freaking out." I didn't respond. At home, I sat on the deck overlooking Lake Ontario, nursing a glass of bourbon, watching the sunset paint the water copper. My wife Elaine placed a hand on my shoulder. "What will you do now?" she asked. I shrugged. "Something will turn up." What Graham didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to learn, was that I hadn't just built Veltria's systems. I'd coded large sections myself with minimal documentation, because the company had never approved funding for a documentation team. Only I understood the deep redundancies, the hidden security layers, the intricate network architecture. And I wasn't planning to explain it to anyone. I started at Veltria Housing back when it was still Bayview Properties, a small real estate management firm with 4 apartment complexes and a dozen employees. Their entire IT setup consisted of 2 desktops, a fax machine, and a dial-up internet connection. The owner, Harold Bay, hired me away from a consulting job in Syracuse. "We're expanding," he told me. "Need someone who can build us something solid." Over 18 years, I turned that rudimentary setup into a fully integrated property management system, handling everything from tenant applications and background checks to automated maintenance requests and online rent collection across 63 properties in 4 states. I built it piece by piece, adapting, refining, upgrading as the company grew. When Harold retired 5 years ago, his son Justin sold the business to a private equity firm that rebranded it as Veltria Housing. They kept me on, impressed by what I had built. But priorities changed. Executives came and went. Quarterly numbers mattered more than long-term stability. The warning signs appeared gradually. First, they rejected my proposal for a documentation team. "Too expensive, they said. "We'll get to it next quarter." That quarter never came. Then they started bringing in consultants, young MBA types who loved buzzwords about disruption and leveraging the cloud. They'd listen to my explanations of our architecture with glazed eyes, then recommend off-the-shelf solutions that couldn't integrate with our custom system. I pushed back, showing them why it wouldn't work. I demonstrated the custom code that made our system unique. Eventually, they just stopped inviting me to planning meetings. Elaine noticed it before I did. "They're pushing you out," she warned over dinner. "You need to prepare." I brushed her off. "They need me. No one else understands how the system fits together." "That might be the problem," she replied quietly. 6 months ago, they hired Graham as CTO. He came from a banking software company and immediately started talking about standardization and legacy replacement. He brought in 3 junior engineers straight out of college, had them shadow me, asking questions. I answered, but I knew they weren't grasping the complexity. How could they? It had taken me years to understand how the interdependencies worked, how I had built redundancies that kept everything running when problems arose. Last week, Graham stopped by my office. "Quick meeting tomorrow morning," he said casually. "Just a quarterly check-in." I should have seen it coming. The first call came 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my home office updating my resume when my phone rang. Graham Vickers. I let it go to voicemail. "Victor, it's Graham. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're having trouble understanding parts of your code. Could you give us a call back? Just a quick consultation." I deleted the message and went back to my resume. 3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding increasingly desperate. By evening, Alan texted me. "System's been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing it." The next morning, Diane from HR called. "Victor, I hope you're doing well. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary, to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite generous." I picked up my phone. "How generous?" $300 per hour, minimum 4-hour engagement." "I'll think about it and get back to you," I said, then hung up. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the lake. Elaine placed a coffee cup in front of me. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking they're finally learning what I'm worth." Over the next 3 days, the calls multiplied. Graham, Diane, even Justin Bay still on the board. The tenant portal was down. The maintenance scheduling system was spitting errors. Automatic payments had failed, impacting thousands of residents. I didn't respond to any of them. On day 4, an email arrived from Devlin Systems, a regional competitor. They managed fewer properties but were growing aggressively. The email came from Lawrence Devlin himself, the director of technology. "Victor, I heard about your situation at Veltria. We've admired your work for years. Would you be open to discussing opportunities with us? We're planning a full infrastructure upgrade." I replied and set up a meeting for the next day. That evening, as Elaine and I prepped dinner, the doorbell rang. Graham Vickers stood on the porch, his designer glasses askew, his immaculate suit now wrinkled. "Victor?" he began, voice strained. "I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but we have a critical emergency. The entire system is down. Nothing works. The team can't fix it. We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer $500 per hour, whatever it takes." I leaned against the door frame. "That sounds serious." "It is. We can't function like this." I thought about the cardboard box in my garage, 18 years of work reduced to a few mementos. I thought about his smirk in that meeting, nothing personal, just cost-cutting, and about the documentation team they'd never approved. "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles," I said quietly. "But I have an interview tomorrow. Something will turn up, just like I thought." And I closed the door. For the first time since my termination, peace washed over me. Not gloating, not vindication, just clarity. I wasn't going to fix what they had broken. The interview with Lawrence Devlin went even better than expected. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Rochester, away from either company's offices. "I've followed your work for years," Lawrence said, stirring his coffee. "That integrated system you built at Veltria is legendary." "No one else has anything close, thank you," I said. "It took time." "That's exactly what I want to discuss. Time. We need someone who understands architecture, security layers, integration points, someone who can build us something better than anything on the market." "I'm listening." Lawrence smiled. "Good. Because I'm prepared to offer you chief systems architect, full benefits, stock options, and a salary 20% higher than Veltria paid you." It was a strong offer. Maybe too strong. Why me? There are younger engineers, cheaper ones. Lawrence laughed. "You sound like your old employer. We tried that already. Hired 3 brilliant kids from top schools. They built something sleek and modern that crashes every time more than 100 users log on. We don't need cheap, we need reliable. I accepted the offer the next day. Meanwhile, Veltria's problems spiraled. Alan kept me updated in texts. The system was partially restored, but key functions were still broken. They had brought in a costly consulting firm specializing in legacy recovery. A week after I joined Devlin, Graham called again. "Victor, please, this is dire. We've lost payment records for 3 months. Tenants are furious. The consultants say they need your input on the database structure." I considered ignoring him, but picked up. "Graham, I'm employed elsewhere now. Exclusive contract. I can't help you. We'll double whatever they're paying. Just 2 days of your time. It's not about the money." Then what? Revenge? Are you enjoying watching us fail? I paused. "No, Graham. I'm not enjoying it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now you're discovering what that actually means. The board wants to bring you back. Full salary plus a signing bonus." For a moment, satisfaction flickered, but it faded quickly. Going back would fix nothing. The same executives who had cut me would still be there. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I've committed to Devlin Systems." His voice hardened. "You know, there could be legal implications if we discover you intentionally made our systems difficult to maintain. Non-compete clauses, intellectual property concerns." There it was, the threat I expected. "The system is exactly as it was when you repeatedly denied a documentation team," I replied evenly. "Every line of code belongs to Veltria, as per my contract. I've taken nothing with me, except my experience, but feel free to have your lawyers call mine." I hung up, hands steady now, not fear, not even anger anymore, just finality. At Devlin, I was building things properly. Full documentation, redundancy, training programs, systems that would outlast me. I wasn't going back. Some lessons could only be learned the hard way. A month later, Alan showed up at my new office. He looked tired but relieved, clutching a laptop bag. "Got time for lunch?" he asked. Over sandwiches, he filled me in. "It's worse than you think," he said, lowering his voice. "They've lost historical data going back 3 years. Backups are corrupted. The consultants are saying they may need to rebuild from scratch." I wasn't surprised. The backups had layered redundancies, precise steps needed for recovery. Miss one, and the whole chain collapsed. That was by design, to protect tenant data from mishandling. "That's not all," Alan added. "I found something while trying to help the consultants." Graham had been planning your termination for months. He met with the board, pushing to cut you and transition to off-the-shelf solutions, said they could replace you with juniors and save over $1 million a year. He opened his laptop, showing me archived emails, conversations between Graham and the board, my name flagged as first target. I read with a strange detachment. One line from Graham stood out. "Hale's custom systems are unnecessarily complex. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity." Alan shook his head. "There's more. The private equity firm that owns Veltria, they've been preparing to sell. Graham was brought in specifically to slash costs and make the company look lean before the sale." And suddenly, it all clicked. The push for standardization, the resistance to documentation, the aggressive staff cuts. It had never been about modernization. It was about dressing the company up for a quick flip. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Alan closed his laptop. "Because I quit yesterday, and I'm not the only one. Half the IT department is gone. The consultants say it could take 6 months or more to restore full functionality, maybe longer." He hesitated. "And Veltria's biggest client, Westbrook Properties, is considering pulling out. They've lost faith in the system." I thought about what that meant. Westbrook represented nearly 30% of Veltria's revenue. Losing them, with a sale pending, would be devastating. "What about you?" "What's next?" I asked. Alan grinned. "Actually, I was hoping Devlin might be hiring database administrators." Later that afternoon, I spoke with Lawrence about bringing Alan aboard. He didn't hesitate. We were building a team, brick by brick, with people who understood what it meant to design systems that lasted. That evening, Graham called again. His voice had lost its polished authority. Victor, please. The situation is critical. Westbrook is threatening to terminate their contract. The board is questioning my decisions. We need your help. I'm sorry, Graham. I can't help you. Name your price. Anything. It's not about price. It's about respect, for experience, for doing things right the first time. Silence stretched. Then he muttered, "You knew this would happen. You knew exactly what would break and when." No, Graham. I just knew what I built and what it took to maintain it. I tried to share that information many times. I ended the call, feeling no triumph, no regret, just quiet certainty. Some lessons can only be learned through failure. The opportunity came faster than expected. 2 months into my role at Devlin Systems, Lawrence called me into his office. "I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook," he said, naming the CEO of Westbrook Properties. "They're officially cutting ties with Veltria next month. They want to know if we can take over their portfolio." Westbrook managed over 10,000 units across the Northeast. Signing them would more than double Devlin's operations. "We're not ready for that kind of scale," I admitted. "The new system is progressing, but it's only halfway built." "What would it take to be ready?" Lawrence pressed. I thought it through. 3 more senior engineers, dedicated server infrastructure, and at least 8 weeks of development. Even then it would be tight. "Jeffrey's desperate," Lawrence said. "Veltria's failures are hurting his reputation with tenants. He's offering 12 weeks, and he'll fund the infrastructure expansion." It was the turning point. If we pulled this off, Devlin would be established as a serious competitor. If we failed, we could sink under the weight of it. "Let me map out the architecture," I said. "I'll have a plan tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. I sketched system diagrams, data migration flows, scaling strategies. By dawn, I had a plan. Ambitious, but possible. A hybrid approach, onboarding Westbrook's portfolio in stages to minimize disruption. When I presented it, Lawrence studied the pages carefully. "This is solid," he said at last, "but I notice you've included a 3-week documentation phase." "It's non-negotiable," I replied. "That's where Veltria failed. We document everything from day one. We train every engineer. No single points of failure. Ever." Lawrence nodded. "Then we'll do it your way." The next weeks were relentless. We hired 5 more engineers, including 2 who had just left Veltria. Alan developed a migration tool to translate Veltria's data into our new structure. I built a modular architecture designed to grow with Westbrook's needs. Halfway through, an email arrived from Justin Bay, the former owner's son, still sitting on Veltria's board. "Victor, I want to apologize. The board was misled about what letting you go really meant. Graham has been removed as CTO. We're struggling to recover. With Westbrook leaving, the impact will be severe. If you ever want to return, the door is open." I didn't reply. 10 weeks into our 12-week timeline, we were ready for a staged rollout. Westbrook's smallest region, 2,000 units in western New York, would migrate first. If successful, the rest would follow. The day before migration, Lawrence called me into his office. A familiar face was waiting, Jeffrey Westbrook himself. "So you're the architect," he said, shaking my hand. "Lawrence has told me plenty." "All good, I hope," Jeffrey smiled. "He says you've built us a system that won't collapse every time we add properties. One that will actually grow with us." "That's the plan," I said. "I also hear you used to work for Veltria." I nodded, cautious. "They're in deep trouble. The private equity firm is trying to sell, but with Westbrook pulling out and their system still crippled, no one's interested." He paused. "Except one." "Who's that?" I asked, though I already had a feeling. "Devlin Systems," Lawrence said. "We're considering an offer at a fraction of what Veltria was valued at just 6 months ago." I looked between them, letting the weight of that sink in. "If that happens," Jeffrey continued, "we'd want someone who understands both companies to lead the integration. Someone who can salvage what's useful from Veltria's infrastructure while transitioning everything onto your new architecture." "You're asking if I'd take that on?" I clarified. Lawrence nodded. "Only if the acquisition goes through, and only if you're comfortable with it." The irony wasn't lost on me. The systems I had built, the people I had trained, the company that had discarded me, all of it might soon fall back under my direction. "I'd be willing," I said at last, but on one condition. We do it right. Full documentation, proper training, no shortcuts. Agreed, Lawrence replied. We've learned that lesson. As I walked back to my office, I felt no desire for revenge, no urge to gloat, just the quiet satisfaction that good work, when done right, always proves its worth eventually. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what had once been Veltria Housing's headquarters. The new sign read, Devlin Integrated Property Management. The acquisition had gone through at less than a quarter of Veltria's previous valuation. Lawrence and I walked the halls together, greeting former Veltria employees who had stayed on for the transition. Some avoided eye contact, embarrassed. Others smiled with relief. A few, those who had worked closely with me before, nodded with quiet understanding. Graham was gone, along with most of the executives who had signed off on my termination. Justin Bay remained as a consultant, smoothing things with legacy clients. When we reached the server room, my old domain, I paused. Through the glass, I could see the blinking lights of the hardware I had once specified. Want to step inside? Lawrence asked. No need, I replied. We'll be migrating everything to the new infrastructure anyway. In the main conference room, Veltria's remaining staff gathered for the announcement. Many of you already know Victor, Lawrence began. He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades. Now he'll be leading the integration, ensuring both companies' technologies evolve into something better than either had before. As I looked out at the faces, some familiar, others new, I felt no temptation to say I told you so. What would be the point? Instead, I spoke briefly about the transition plan, the timeline, and the support they could expect throughout the process. I made one thing clear. No one would be left behind in the name of cost-cutting. The irony hung in the air. A year later, Devlin Integrated Property Management had become the largest property management company in the Northeast. The migration was complete. Every property now ran on the new system I had designed, fully documented, properly staffed, and working exactly as intended. On a crisp autumn morning, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Lawrence. The leaves along Lake Ontario burned red and gold, a fitting backdrop for closing one chapter and beginning another. The board approved your proposal, Lawrence said as soon as I sat down. The Technical Education Division launches next quarter. You'll have full autonomy, curriculum design, instructor hires, the works. This had been my one condition for staying beyond integration. Not a new title, not more money. A division dedicated to training the next generation, teaching them not just how to code, but how to build systems meant to endure. Thank you, I said quietly. No, Lawrence replied. Thank you. What you've built here, it's remarkable. Not just the technology, but the culture. Documentation, knowledge sharing, quality over quick fixes. That's rare. Later that afternoon, I packed up my integration office. Unlike my abrupt exit from Veltria, this transition was deliberate, a planned move into my new role. As I was closing the last box, Justin Bay appeared at the door. Got a minute? He asked. We walked outside to the courtyard. My father asked about you, Justin said. He's retired in Florida now, but he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back, in a sense. How's Harold? I asked. Good. Fishing a lot. Justin paused, then added, he always said letting you go would be the biggest mistake this company could make. Turns out he was right. I nodded, unsure what to say. I learned something from all this, Justin continued. Value isn't always visible until it's gone. Driving home along the lakeshore, I thought about value, of experience, of care, of doing things right the first time, about systems built to last and the people who build them. I had never sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I'd simply moved forward, building something stronger, something that would outlast short-term thinking. Sometimes the best response to being undervalued is to prove your worth elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves.